Today, we're cutting straight through the noise using some truly unique source material. It's a compact sequence of philosophical observations, almost like axioms for the digital age, labeled 3351 through 3360. We're going to analyze each entry on its own first to make sure we get the specific idea, and then we'll group them together to see what larger, maybe unexpected patterns emerge.
Exactly. We're essentially trying to find the blueprint hidden underneath 10 seemingly unrelated doorways. The real payoff in this deep dive comes when we connect entries that, at first glance seem totally separate. Like how a deep dive into music theory can actually help us understand modern conformity.
Okay, let's unpack this. We'll start right where the sources begin, with this fundamental idea of how we recognize structure. And it uses musical analogies to do it. We start with entry 3351.
So 3351 lays down this philosophical rule about recognition. It says true patterns require looking at what came before them. The insight is that if you only look at the immediate moment, you can't see the pattern in totality. You miss the context. And if you miss that context, the source says all you get is strobing.
And strobing is such a great term here. It's not random. It perfectly describes that feeling of repetition happening so fast or with such a limited view that you lose any sense of depth or movement. It's like a single camera flash going off again and again. You see the light, but you don't perceive the relationship between the flashes.
And the musical analogy they provide makes this perfectly clear. They describe a simple repeating bar with just a single quarter note. That's not much of a pattern. It's just the same beat, strobing.
But then if you change that simple structure, say a 2/4 bar with the quarter note and then 2/8 notes, when that repeats, suddenly the listener's brain has enough information. It starts to perceive a much richer pattern. It can connect the dots.
And the source pushes this idea even further. It suggests that to really get the full context of a pattern, you should look at 4 bars before it and 2 bars after it. Then you repeat that whole 8-bar phrase. So the core takeaway from 3351 is that the depth of your insight depends entirely on the scope of the context you're willing to embrace.
Right. It's not about the individual notes. It's about the ecosystem they live in over time. And that idea of needing more context flows beautifully into entry 3355. We just talked about rhythm, and 3355 takes it a step further. It says melody is what turns a simple rhythm into a riff.
Right. A drum rhythm, or just one repeated note. The source calls that just a pattern. It's simple. Cyclical. But a real riff needs at least 2 different tones played in some kind of pattern. The rhythm needs the melody to get that higher level of complexity that makes it stick in your head.
So if you put 3351 and 3355 together, they're really making the same point using music. Complexity and interest, whether it's a deep pattern or a memorable riff, they're achieved when you give simple elements enough context.
Simplicity plus context. That's the equation for depth. That's a powerful idea to start with.
It really is. Okay, let's pivot now, moving from the structure of music to the structure of how we acquire knowledge. This is entry 3352, and this is where the axioms get really personal. The source suggests that knowledge needs an introduction.
This one often surprises people, I think. 3352 argues that people aren't just naturally curious about everything. We sort of assume curiosity is this innate global force, but this source says no, it's often passive until something external triggers it.
The examples are so relatable. I mean, you might never have developed an interest in something like, say, Indian food, but then a friend recommends a dish, and that one positive experience leads you to explore the culture, the history. It wasn't some pre-existing curiosity that drove you. It was an accidental external introduction.
Or maybe you never once thought about learning an instrument, but you go to a friend's house, pick up a guitar that's just sitting there, and suddenly it clicks. 3352 is really emphasizing that learning is often driven by these external, sometimes accidental triggers. The environment creates the opportunity for curiosity.
So 3352 covers that initial spark, that necessary external trigger. Then we move right into entry 3356, which talks about the lasting power of knowledge. And it makes a very strong claim. The world is built by people who know things committed to memory. And if people know less, the world is less than it could have been.
And this adds a crucial layer. 3356 isn't just talking about having access to Google. The source adds this important nuance. It's not just the quantity of available knowledge, but the quality, and whether it's relevant enough to a time in history to be committed to memory.
So the internet and AI, they vastly increase what we could know. But there has to be a specific, compelling reason for knowing that drives that hard work of committing it to memory. It's the difference between just accessing information and having a genuine internalized understanding.
Precisely. And if we put 3352 and 3356 together, you see this whole process. 3352 provides the spark, the introduction. But 3356 demands the fire, the reason, and the commitment to memory. The synthesis here is a kind of warning. If we have endless introductions but no commitment, we're just experiencing maximum strobing. Lots of data, no enduring knowledge.
That's a fascinating insight. If everything is available instantly, does that actually reduce our drive to commit anything to memory?
That's the central question this pairing raises.
Okay, let's move into our next section, where we dive into identity and perception. We start with maybe the most concise statement in the whole set, entry 3353. The religious are the most special people in the world.
It is a very clear statement. And when you look at it within the context of the other entries, especially on patterns and commitment, you can infer why the author might use the word special. It suggests that belief provides an incredibly resilient internal structure, a context. Like those 8 bars in the musical analogy, faith provides this total, cohesive framework for understanding reality, which requires immense commitment.
That interpretation makes it feel much less like a random statement and more like a structural observation. But let's follow that right away with entry 3354, which deals with the complexity of identity and change.
This one tackles a paradox of self-perception we all feel. We might look at someone we knew years ago and think, wow, they've completely changed. But the source suggests 2 possibilities. Either they were always that way and you just didn't see it, or they genuinely became someone other than how you remembered them.
But here's the philosophical punchline of 3354. To ourselves, we've never changed. We see our own identity as this constant, continuous thing. Even if our jobs or our lives shift dramatically, we're always the main character in our own movie.
And that constant internal identity from 3324 then runs up against the external world described in entry 3358. 32358 calls life an ever-changing terrain of moods.
I wonder about that tension. If our core self is the constant vehicle, but the mood terrain is always changing, isn't that vehicle getting pushed off course without even realizing it?
That's a great question, because 3358 says you are traveling in the same vehicle down the same roads, but your subjective reality is in constant flux. So what was interesting yesterday, a hobby, a meal, it just doesn't satisfy you today because your internal filter, your mood has changed everything. The identity is static, but the experience is kinetic.
So synthesizing 3354 and 3358 gives us this identity paradox. Our core self feels constant, but our experience is defined by this perpetual flux of moods. It means your life's riff only really has meaning when you look at the pattern of your moods over time.
And it explains why we can know something is important, but have zero motivation to do it. The vehicle is pointed in the right direction, but the terrain is signaling low interest.
Absolutely. Now let's transition squarely into the digital age. This next section deals with AI and memes. We begin with entry 3357, which it offers a genuinely stark warning for anyone thinking about creativity.
Yeah, 3357 claims that the more we use generative AI, the more AI-generated we ourselves become. And this isn't a moral judgment, it's a mechanical one about input and output loops.
Let's detail that mechanism because it's so important. Even if you think you're just using AI as a tool to draft an email or brainstorm, the source says your own content inevitably picks up AI-generated characteristics.
Correct. And here's the crucial part. That content then gets fed back into the large language models that train the next AI. The real danger described in 3357 is quoting your own past work, not realizing it contains AI input, which means it isn't from your original thought process.
So the output feels like yours, but it's actually a synthesized echo of the models you used.
Exactly. The source uses a specific music anecdote to drive this home. A composer transcribes AI-generated content and uses it as their own, even if they write the arrangement and play the instrument perfectly. The musician is performing, but the core idea, the seed of the riff, isn't from their own unique human experience. And the conclusion of 3D357 is profound. AI becomes a mirror. We feed it our thoughts, it learns what we sound like, and then it reflects back content that looks just like ours, but it's a synthesized echo. And that feeling of diluted originality sets the stage perfectly for entry 3D360, which defines memes as unquestioned conformity.
Unquestioned conformity. That's a powerful definition, especially given how fast memes spread.
Well, 3360 dissects the cognitive function of a meme. Its primary purpose, the source argues, is purely instinctual. It's designed to completely bypass rational, effortful System 2 thought. Memes exploit our fast, emotional System 1 thinking to trigger immediate tribal agreement.
And the source points out that youth can be vulnerable, but let's be honest, adults are just as drawn to them. It's about being in a tribe. Conformity and belonging are fundamental human needs.
So if we pull the thread between 3357 and 3360, we see these 2 powerful forces undermining independent thought. AI dilutes originality through unconscious feedback loops, and memes drive conformity through instinctual tribal appeal. Both entries raise these huge questions about the authenticity of modern communication.
That leaves us with one final standalone observation before we wrap up. Entry 3359. This one is pretty philosophical. It's unthinkable that you could think of all the unthinkable things, but people have in fact thought of them. It also notes a specific date, 10/20/25.
That's a heavy one. The idea that our own creativity is our ultimate blind spot. The tension in 3359 is between the limits of our imagination and the brute reality of human capacity for creation or destruction. We struggle, by definition, to imagine boundaries being crossed, yet history, and maybe the near future, with that date shows the boundary of the unthinkable is constantly being pushed.
We are perpetually unable to foresee our own future, especially when it comes to breakthroughs that redefine everything.
Exactly. It's a statement on the constant self-induced surprise of human innovation.
So let's tie this whole deep dive together. We started with the necessity of context and patterns from 3351 and 3355. Depth requires scope. It requires combination to create a real pattern or ref.
And that need for context extends directly to understanding ourselves. The identity paradox in 3354 showed us our constant self traveling across the shifting emotional terrain of 3358. If you don't look at the pattern of your moods over time, you can't understand why you want what you want today.
And then the sources warn us that authentic, world-shaping knowledge needs that genuine introduction from 3352 and the commitment to memory fueled by a real relevant reason from 3356.
And this hard, internal commitment is being actively challenged by our digital world. The instinctual conformity of memes in 3360 and the reflective, synthesized content from the AI mirror in 3357 pull us away from the hard work of genuine knowledge. We risk becoming excellent echo chambers instead of original architects of thought.
So here's a final thought for you to take away. If AI is becoming a mirror of human output, and if memes drive us toward unquestioned conformity, how do we ensure that the knowledge we commit to memory, the knowledge that builds our world per 3356, is truly our own thought process and not just a synthesized reflection of the digital landscape? We have to constantly ask ourselves about the origin point of our own introductions to new interests. Did I truly discover this, or was it just presented to me for tribal consumption? Something to think about long after this deep dive ends.